Hi everyone, it's Roger and James here from the What's on Disney Plus podcast. In this week's episode, we're going to be talking about our thoughts on Soul. We'll also be talking about Burrow and the new Disney Gallery Mandalorian episode. And the focus of this episode is going to be on the best and worst of Disney Plus in 2020. So before we get into all of that, just want to do a big shout out to all of our supporters on Patreon and also on YouTube. So members of the Gold membership and above include Bad Dog, Martin, Adam, Jeremy, Joshua, and also then on Patreon we have got What's on Netflix, Lauren, The Juice, Darren, Chris, Jacob, Jamie, Andrew, and a huge thank you to Sarah at the executive producer section. Again, all of your support really does make a big difference. It's helped the podcast continue to grow, and just gonna it just make a massive difference in making sure that this podcast can continue. So let's jump into it. I hope you all had a fantastic Christmas. I hope you all say, like, hopefully you got some nice stuff. I mean, I just happened to be, my lovely wife got me this massive Batwing Lego set, so I'm gonna be busy a bit later on. So yeah, hopefully you've all had a really nice Christmas. And the nice thing as well is, we had a brand new movie to watch, Soul. And also you had Wonder Woman. We didn't get that over here in the UK. But yeah, so let's jump into Soul. So I saw this one a couple of weeks ago, but I know James hasn't. So James, what did you think of Soul?
I loved it. It was really well done. I have to admit, the first 5 to 10 minutes, I wasn't really feeling it. It started very slow. Definitely not like Up or something like that. But then when it actually picked up, I was like, okay, this is really good. I will say, and I think you said this last week too, it's definitely geared towards adults. Not in the sense that it's mature or violent or anything like that, but I think the target audience is adults, because a lot of the stuff that it goes into are things that kids aren't even going to care about yet at all. It's very existential in that. I think kids will enjoy when he possesses the cat body, and his body is possessed by a different spirit. That was all, fun hijinks kind of stuff. Nothing you haven't seen before, but entertaining.
Yeah, it was like, I remember saying this last week, I think it was that the kids section needed that. I think the kids needed it to kind of give the kids something a bit more, because I've seen a few people say this on the Facebook group of the kids were getting bored. Kids were weren't kind of digging it, and lots of people saying how great it is, but primarily it seems to be older people kind of saying, whereas the kids, it's going to be difficult. So I don't know if this was the right move for doing Disney Plus, where get to a larger audience and get the word out about this movie. But I thought it was really great. I thought it was a really lovely story, but the story about making the most of your life, and the purpose of your life and why you're here. I just don't think it's a 7-year-old is gonna get that.
No, I have to agree. So, like, in terms of, can I sit this in front of my nieces and nephews? Can they watch it? Honestly, I'd probably I'd put Inside Out on. Very similar story, but much more geared towards kid. But this is a very good movie if you want to watch it with your siblings or your parents or something like that. Very good holiday fare in that regard. This is kind of like the opposite of what we normally get from Pixar, though. Normally, they're kid-focused movies that have things for adults so we don't get bored. This is very much the other way around. This is for adults, and then you've got the cat antics and stuff like that. It's very colorful, very pretty. The music's really good. But yeah, this is it's not How to Train Your Dragon. It's not pretty much anything Toy Story, Bug's Life, any of that.
I was going to say, in some way, Pixar kind of got a little bit of hate recently about some of their movies becoming a bit too generic, a bit too like kid focused, and they weren't as good as they used to be. Things like Finding Dory and the Cars movies and The Incredibles were all kind of like, yeah. And then this kind of feels like, like I said, they got their groove back.
Yeah, well, there was certainly a feelings of like early 2000s Disney going on there, where rather than creating new stories that we really wanted to see, they were going back and doing Incredibles 2, Finding Nemo 2, Cars 3, that would be a little bit earlier, Toy Story 4. Toy Story 4, I've said it plenty of times.
Yeah.
It was a perfectly fine movie that we didn't need at all. And that's really been the feeling for Pixar. But between this and
well, yesterday we watched Coco again because it was on BBC on Christmas Day. That was the main Christmas Day movie over here. Was Coco. Watched it again. So I loved it. I love that movie. And again, kind of in some ways, watching it again yesterday kind of reminded me of that thing with Soul, of saying something completely different, telling a different story, and something that was fresh. And so kind of had aspects of stuff that you had seen before. I mean, but at the same time, it did it in a different way. And I was really impressed with Soul. It was definitely as a top tier movie. Well, I think one of the best movies of 2020.
Yeah, and it doesn't exactly go the way you expect it to. Like the destination is pretty much what you expect, but the route, it takes some turns that you may not guess at, which works in its favor. But it is kind of an interesting mashup of, say, like Inside Out and Coco. But that undersells it quite a bit with that kind of description.
Yeah, no, I thought it was a fantastic movie. I'm glad it did kind of get released this year and get a Disney Plus and kind of be the Christmas movie of. I mean, I thought the whole thing of like Wonder Woman versus Soul was such in some way a ridiculous idea because they were so different audiences, and ultimately most people probably had time to watch both, so they didn't really. And it's that the price difference and stuff was so different. But I'm glad they went with it the way it went. I'm really glad everyone's been able. Generally, I think there's been a lot of a buzz around sort of Soul, and I think them releasing it on Christmas Day was a really good idea. And I think it's really it was like they were able to kind of make the whole of the month about Disney Plus, about this movie. We had it on planes, on the TV, or everything you went by. You saw these adverts of Soul as a way of pushing Disney Plus, and I think it did exactly what we hope it done when they bring out the numbers.
If I had to level a complaint, I would probably say it would have been nice to have it on Christmas Eve, because I know a lot of families really start Christmas on Christmas Eve, and Christmas Eve night is often the sit by the fire and watch some heartwarming movie, and this would have been nice for that too.
Yeah, we watched Elf. We watched Elf this year.
I ended up watching Claws on Netflix, which I only had just found about, but I guess it came out last year, and that was excellent. That was a fantastic.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one yet. It's the kind of thing as well of there's so many movies out. There's so many, and it's one of those really weird things. It's like you can. Sometimes they're like they'll put movies on TV. It's like you've seen them before, but you end up sitting there watching them. But yeah, so that was. So what about Burrow? What did you think of Burrow?
Burrow was cute. I enjoyed that. I think both of us have been through like the new home process a few times here.
Yeah.
I mean, just in the span of the podcast, we've both moved at least once.
Yeah.
And if you go back to Diz Kingdom, I've moved like 3 times, and you've moved like 3 times.
Yeah.
And so Burrow was very much like, oh yeah, I understand this process. Where you're like, this time it's the dream home, but then you see your neighbors, and you're like, oh well, this is not quite as great as the neighbors. And I enjoyed it. Let's leave it at that.
The thing is, what I really loved about it is the animation style. It was so traditional and so loving, and it kind of gave me that Christmas vibe, because it's the kind of movies or shows that we would, when you were growing up, we'd see on Channel 4 or something like that. It was or on the BBC, and it kind of had that vibe to it of like being very traditional. And I really like that from Pixar. It's not what you tend to think of with Pixar, of that. And I thought it did a very good. I remember watching it. I've watched it twice, and just like I was a real just nice traditional short, and I really enjoyed it. It didn't. So I always tend to think of Spark shorts as something that's like pushing boundaries, and this didn't feel like that. This didn't feel like it was pushing any boundaries, pushing anything different. But it obviously gave it somebody new an opportunity, which I think the Disney would be a shame if they didn't do anything with. But it felt very traditional, but it didn't feel like a Spark short.
Yeah. So first thought, it reminded me a lot of the old classic Winnie the Pooh animations. Like the style is very similar, the color palette's very similar. A little bit Wind in the Willows as well, going way back. You mentioned the creator of this. I looked them up on IMDb. They'd actually done a YouTube video a number of years ago that's done the rounds a few times and is really good. It's a pet owner comes home and he's just exhausted and can't take care of his dog properly, and so the dog ends up cooking him an omelet. It's called Omelet. It's really adorable. And when I saw that they were connected, it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So I really hope that this director gets a lot more work, either Pixar or Disney, or if they're not going to do it, then one of the other companies should pick them up, because they do very cute work.
But yeah, it was kind of one of those things. But you see what I mean with the Spark Short thing? It didn't push the boundaries the same way.
That's true. It was a safe. They've had a couple of Spark Shorts that were safe, but definitely when you think about it, you're thinking more like Pearl or.
I mean, you had Pearl was about sexism.
That's last year.
And then you had like Kickball, which was about a dog fighting, and then we had Out, and then we've had like Float, and what was the other one? Loop, that were about autism, and then we had Wind, which was about sort of, what was it, a racial, about, I think, migration. That's what it was about. And this one didn't kind of have that same feel, but I don't know. I think it's a credit. I think it's something everyone should check out if you've got Disney Plus.
And it's only a few minutes long, so it's you're not committing to much if you decide you don't like it. But I think you'll like it.
We also had a new episode of Disney Gallery, The Mandalorian. It's in the second. So you have to go into the original one, and it's in the second season. They've kind of added it in because I think some people were trying to. It was a little bit of messy for some people when it launched. I know you didn't. Yeah.
It's odd because it has a banner. They put it on the top banner, but if you go to like what's new on Disney Plus, it's not there at all. Well, and even clicking on the banner only takes you to season 1.
Yeah, you kind of have to go in and find. I watched it last night. It felt a little bit more like a very long, like, making of. I know that's what it is, but the essence of what the first season was, because they didn't do any of the round table stuff, because obviously they didn't film any of it because of COVID, because they literally just shut down filming 2 weeks before it kind of all started kicking off. So in one way it's much more of a traditional making of behind the scenes, but in some ways it kind of works for its best because it manages to go through all of the episodes in one foul swoop. I feel like I learned a little bit. A lot of it was kind of similar, but I kind of got the same vibe. I mean, the best thing I liked about the gallery was the sitting around talking. I didn't really like all of the the YouTube featurette stuff, so it kind of was quite nice to get all of that in one foul swoop. And they only spent maybe 5 minutes on each episode, and yeah, it was fine. I'm glad they did it. I'm glad that they obviously had bits of it, and they know that they're not going to be able to get them all back together because they're all busy working on season 3 in the Boba Fett series. So they kind of. Yeah, I'm glad they did it. And I'm also glad that they got it out straight away, because the Gallery of the Mandalorian, they waited like nearly 6 months before that one came out. And this was, get it out now while everyone's enjoyed it.
Well, I don't think they were planning on doing the gallery in the first place for the first Mandalorian. It was kind of a we need content desperate effort to get stuff on Disney Plus at that point. I have not watched this one yet. I look forward to seeing it this weekend. I love behind the scenes stuff. I like both the anecdotes, the round table kind of things, but I also like just footage of what's going on behind the scenes and seeing, directors talking to actors and puppeteers and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, there's loads of stuff in there. Definitely worth checking out. I mean, the fact that you only get the one episode is much easier to jump into. Right. So that was all of this kind of week's new releases. Next Christmas, it's on Christmas Eve. So everyone, we have that option for the Friday drop will be Christmas Eve next year. So let's now shift gears and let's talk now about the best and worst of 2020 in terms of Disney Plus. Now, 2020 has been a very different year, a very hard year for many. It's also been, I think, essentially, it has had a big impact on Disney Plus in terms of it slowed down a lot. We saw Falcon and the Winter Soldier completely delayed. We're not going to be getting it till March, so at least we are getting it. And it also focused Disney in that they had to, in some way, go out and buy other movies. I mean, I think things like Clouds and Black Beauty probably wouldn't have been on Disney Plus had COVID not happened. They might have got it, but it feels like those were kind of things that they picked up extra because they needed to fill in the gap. And I think that actually helped Disney Plus grow in like, picking up content like this that wasn't made by them. But yeah, I think so. Let's go through some of our highlights. Let's start off with the more fun ones, the ones that we didn't like, because I think and then we'll leave on a high.
And honestly, there won't be that many on the bad side either.
No. The thing is, as well, is there's a kind of thing for me of I don't necessarily think of it as bad in terms of like there was a few things I watched which we'll go into what I found boring, but there was a lot of stuff which was just very average. That I kind of was like, yeah, okay. There was nothing wrong with it, but it didn't blow my socks off. But there was a few things I just didn't enjoy watching. So
see, I was going to say the exact same thing. Like, there's only one item on the list for me where I'm just like, no, this was terrible. Never ever show this to me again. And the rest of the stuff, I'm just like, I could take it or leave it. If someone wanted to watch it, I'd watch it with them. But there's one item. There's one where I'd be like, you're on your own. And I think we both agree on this one.
Which one is it for you then?
This is Timmy Failure.
Yeah, that was definitely on my ones. What a disappointing movie that was. That was such a like, oh, is that it? It had like hints of goodness, and then it just squandered them all.
It's the main character is just completely unlikable, and it's not even really his fault too. They hinted at it in the movie that he's got this trauma in his past having to do with his dad. Like his dad, we don't know what happened to the dad, but he left at some point. Whether he left or he died, I don't even think that's covered.
Yeah.
But this kid is clearly not coping with it at all. Like he cannot handle this, and nobody's helping him at all. And he's just acting out in all these ways. And we're supposed to be like, oh, it's so cute. He thinks he's got this gorilla or whatever it is. And you're right, the polar bear. and oh, he's gonna go on a jaunt on the dam, and it's gonna be hilarious. And I'm like, no, this is awful. This kid needs help. And you've even got
because I remember at the time I was just going, the teacher's not doing anything bad. The teacher's trying the teacher was really trying to help him. And it got to the point of like the kid was traumatizing him to the point where the teacher was just like, I can't deal with this kid anymore.
I mean, that's the common trope in these stories is you've got the evil teacher who's evil for no apparent reason and just has it out for this kid. And like, oh, okay, well, that's going to be Sean Wallace because that's kind of the role he pops into. And you're like, wait, no, I actually really sympathize with this guy. He's in a really tough situation. The kid just will not accept his help.
Yeah. It was a very strange little movie. I think the tone, and again, it's interesting because after February, I have not seen one tweet or in our Facebook. I mean, we're close to 150,000 members, and I don't think I have seen a mention of Timmy Failure since it came out. And no one said, oh, it's like no one mentions it. It just completely got forgotten off of it. And it was a very, because it could have been a franchise, but it just got lost. The character just didn't connect with people very much.
Yeah. And honestly, if it hadn't come out like at the beginning of the year, right when things were just starting to slow down, not just in the world, but Disney Plus was in a drought at this point. Mandalorian was done. We had nothing on the radar for a while. If it hadn't come out in that period, I think we would have just blown it off completely. We would have just been like, I watched 15 minutes of it and it's awful. We're not going to talk about it any further than that. But it was like the only thing we had for like a 4-week stretch.
I think it's like now we're getting sort of in a different situation when we get something fresh pretty much every week. We're back in February. We were straight off the high of Mandalorian and nothing was filling in that gap. And that kind of fills in with a movie that came just like a couple of weeks later, which for me was Stargirl, which I was so bored.
See, I didn't even watch Stargirl.
I just found that movie. It was the only movie I think during the year where I was checking my watch to see how long we had left, and I think my wife was like, I said, well, I've got to watch the rest of it. I've got like half, and I just didn't like it. It was so slow and plodding, and Yeah, I just really didn't enjoy it. It was those two movies of just like, oh, I really just didn't like it, and it was a shame because we were right at that point where like Disney Plus kind of needed something because we were getting we were in that zone where we were getting, I think we were just starting to get like the Love Victor and the High Fidelity and the Lizzie McGuire stuff was all firing up about Disney Plus being too kid friendly and didn't have anything juicy for anybody. And like these two movies kind of hit at roughly about the same time, and like, come on guys, you gotta, we need something here. And it was just like, it was a bit of a bit of a rough spot, but those two movies definitely stood out to me as being the worst movies of the year.
Yeah, I didn't have to watch Stargirl to know that it wasn't going to work for me. Even though we were in a content drought when it came out, I was like, I'm not watching this. I cannot sit through this. For people who've been watching recently, the original reasoning was in the same line as Godmothered. This just looks really cringy, intentionally, but cringy, and I can't sit through it. And as it turned out, it's just like, nope, this is about the most generic movie you could possibly imagine. And I have to assume that part of it was also that they launched it at the same time that DC Universe launched their Stargirl show, which is completely unrelated. And part of me is just like, the only reason Disney did this was to confuse social media. Stargirl's trending. Oh wait, no, not that Stargirl, the other Stargirl, the good Stargirl. Actually, I don't know if the DC one was any good or not, but I'll assume it was.
Just looking here at some of the other releases. So something else which just popped up, It's a Dog's Life. A series which probably for some kids enjoyed it. I remember for me, I couldn't complete the series. I really found that one to be the tone was all over the place. It just felt like you were watching a Disney Channel kids advert, and it was I just remember at the time being that one was like, I don't get this show. I don't get it. It was a shame really, because it could have been something, and they were dropping it weekly. They were trying desperately. They thought they had something, but I don't know if they did.
Well, it was also coming out before they'd really started to establish whether they were going to do weekly drops or full package drops on smaller shows. So I don't know if they really thought that this was going to be like their flagship title for that time period when it was dropping, or if they were still just like, no, everything's weekly, because it was after this that stuff started to they're just like, this isn't a big release, let's just drop all of it.
I mean, it was kind of like one of they did that one back in May, and that was kind of like, because Prop Culture was like the first season drop, wasn't it? Because that was the beginning of May, and they kind of jumped on that, and then it's only really been, I think, the Magic Kingdom documentary series that kind of went weekly, which kind of made a little more sense of that one. But so they were changing around with the setting, but that was one that definitely sort of stood out. Another one I didn't really like, for me personally, was Becoming. And that was, I don't necessarily think because the show was badly, because I think it was the episodes I saw were very well done. It was just the people that they had on it, I had no interest. Didn't really know who they were. It was one of those kind of series of going, this a load of American sports stars, and like it wasn't. And I said at the time, because it wasn't a very internationally friendly show, because the celebrity guests were very like kind of low end American, and it just like it didn't. So therefore, instantly when I looked at the list again, I don't know who these people are, so I'm really not interested in them. But then the episodes I watched were very well done. So it wasn't like, it's not like I'm sitting there going that it was the worst of the year. It's just like, it wasn't for me. And there was nothing wrong with it, but it just didn't. And I kind of looking at, I would put it on my list as being one of the worst ones, because I didn't like who they were.
Yeah, so we've moved out of the worst category and into just like, these aren't living up to expectations, or they're at best boring. Like Becoming isn't on my list, but it could have been on my list. The one with the kid who was on the Lion King Broadway was really well done, and it was a fascinating episode about just how much hard work goes into all of these things. But the one, there was a country singer, and I was just like, so this entire episode is just your father was a music producer, and you grew up with music, and now you're a musician.
And you were a one-hit wonder.
Congrats.
It was,
I mean, still, I mean, it's great that they had that success, but it's like your story of becoming is literally you were born into a music producing family.
Because I remember watching the Ashley Tisdale one, and I didn't really know much about her, and I remember watching it. Oh, okay, that I can't, and I enjoyed that episode. And then I watched one about the Gronk, and I didn't like him.
Gronkowski, yeah.
Yeah, it was like I'd seen him in WrestleMania, and I didn't. And it was like, okay, you're a footballer, you're a jock. Okay, fine, whatever. Moving on from there. Yeah,
I was going to attach on to that since we're talking about shows where it's like you look at the celebrity lineup and you're like, couldn't you get anyone better? I'm going to throw in Earth to Ned because the idea of it's kind of interesting.
And we got more episodes dropping on Friday.
I'm good, thanks. The execution was acceptable. I didn't really like the main hook of it in the end, but it had decent production values, and I could see how it could become a good show. But then you look at the lineup for the first season, and heck, for season 2 or 1.5, you're like, you couldn't have gotten anyone else.
Yeah, the trouble is, I think it's like the same thing for me. I mean, I watched about half of Earth to Ned, and it's coming back this week, and I'm like, okay, I might check out an episode or two. But again, very well made. Great idea, but again, I remember watching someone going, well, I don't know who these are, or when they were again. I don't know. It was a bit of an odd series. I don't. This is again. I didn't want to put. I didn't really put it on my worst list. That was very much kind of like in the middle of just like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah,
It wasn't. It didn't really jump to mind of going, oh, that was one of the worst, because it's like I had a bit of respect for it in terms of. It was very well done, very well made, and it had a thing, but it wasn't for me. And I was kind of in that same thing as Becoming, where it was like, yeah, the guest lineup didn't work for me.
The other thing about it that didn't really work for me was they tried to separate it out from other talk shows by having the gimmick where the people who came on would teach Ned about something that happens on Earth. Like I know they did the Gina Carano episode, and they talked about like her rise as a female athlete, things like that. And it's just like, no, this gimmick just isn't working, because you're not talking about things that you would go to a talk show to listen about. Like I can find out about the history of these people pretty easily. Most of them are pretty well documented. You're supposed to go onto a talk show to sell their upcoming product. Like
that in some ways what they tried to turn this into an evergreen show. Right. Rather than be a news, you know, when I watch like Jonathan Ross, they go on there and they tell you about the thing of now, and they make jokes about the stuff that's happened this week, and it's a very topical thing, but it doesn't have very long life. And I think with After Ned, they try to make it evergreen, and in some ways it loses what a talk show is, because they've kind of they're not talking about anything. And I think that's where it was just, and it's like, coming up this week. It's like, okay, so we got like 10 episodes dropping. I'll check it out, but there's no buzz around the series returning.
Yeah, they could okay, so I don't know how difficult it is for them to make a single episode. I don't know if it's a multi-week process or something they could kind of turn around.
Well, apparently, in the interview with the creator, Brian Henson, he said they can only do like 10 minutes with the Ned at any one time before they have to stop. They can only film it like small bits because of the exhaustion from the puppeteers and stuff, so they can only they have to do it in it takes a lot of time to get that interview out, if it so it's quite a labor intensive. I mean, I still think that's a very impressive setup, and in some ways it's like you spent all this money creating it, if you could tweak it, this could be a really maybe turn it into a half-hour show and do it weekly, do something with it. That would be kind of cool. There's definitely something to it that needs a little bit of tweaking. There
is an availability on Disney Plus for a weekly like news bite show,
and the Disney Insider,
like the Disney Insider, but with actual content. They could do fluff pieces, but they could also do when the parks reopen. This week the gondolas have started operating. I know that's history at this point, but just as a news, you can get a Disney update news. That's not the Disney Insider, because that was a weird one.
That was such a weird show, because it's like I thought it was a really good concept. Of course, then COVID hit, and then the release schedule got thrown out the window, and like you could tell the entire show just kind of went.
So we're going to talk about Mulan now, which
Yeah.
we just announced has actually been pushed back like 5 months.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's maybe the numbers weren't pulling it in, and they just decided. But yeah, everything they filmed, everything they did was just. That was just. I really do think of the Insider was the COVID kind of. They were changing the release schedule so much that they just couldn't do it. It just wasn't working. It makes so much more sense for them. It's like Earth Ed is out this week, do an episode of the Disney Insider talking about this week about it. But everything had to be online in order for it to kind of click into place. It's really because they kind of flipped from that. Now, of course, they're doing like What's Up Disney Plus on YouTube, and they kind of moved all of them all on there rather than putting it on Disney Plus. So they are doing stuff, but the Disney Insider is one of those. I don't even put it on the worst list, because it's like it wasn't worse, it wasn't bad. It just was. Unfortunately, it was a mistake. It just wasn't going to work with COVID.
It was a casualty. It no fault of its own, and that's true of a couple other items here. But we can talk about one that's not a casualty. That, in fact, one that got more spotlight because of COVID, and we needed content. And we're going to talk about the Big Fib.
Well, actually, to be honest, I was kind of going to lob 3 things in here at once.
All right,
was the Big Fib, Shop Class, and Be Our Guest, because I kind of felt the same with all 3 of them. And it was the kind of thing of like, the problem I found with all of this was it's like, a game show, we have game shows over here all the time. We at 5 o'clock at night, both our main TV channels flip to a game show, and you watch it night after night after night after night. And game shows are kind of one of those. It's a thing that goes on, and it's a cheap TV to show, and they can do episode after episode after episode. And Disney kind of tried to do it with 3 shows this year, and the trouble is, the biggest problem I think they made was they went so kid friendly that they would alienate any adult watching it, because it was just it was just a Disney Channel game show, and
the contestants were kids, so
but they became like the tone was just you're watching something like Shop Class. It's like, if you changed kids to an adult, that could have been on at 8 o'clock at night on the BBC if they had a presenter that had a bit of charisma, but also if the actual thing they were doing was a fine enough idea that they could do that at anyone. That was not much off the Great British Bake Off. They what they were doing, but the presenters were just even the one with the Be Our Chef was just like this completely just out of, I don't know what they, it's like, we just need someone that's been on television before. Grab somebody.
So I don't include Be Our Chef, and I don't include Shop Class. I do include Big Fib, but I get what you're saying on those as well. Shop Class, well, okay, so both Shop Class and Be Our Chef really would have benefited from being much, much shorter, because so much of each episode is dedicated to telling us about the kids, which is fair enough. The kids should get their moment in the sun. This is something that they're going to remember for the rest of their life, and they should have that little clip on TV of them talking about whatever their creation is or what motivates them. But at the same time, for everyone else who's watching, it's just like, I just want to see what they baked. I just want to see the end result.
usually it's kind of like, hello, who are you? Where are you from? What do you do for a living? And that's kind of like the
right.
Done and dusted about 20 seconds, and then they move on. And yeah, it was a shame, because again, we were in that kind of weekly drop for these kind of shows, and they spent, you could say they spent the money on the set and all the rest of it, but it's like Disney Plus was trying to find its, 2020 feels a bit like Disney Plus creators were there going, right, let's throw that against the wall. We'll throw everything we've got at the wall and see what sticks, see what people react to. What do people want? What do people like? We need to get a gist of what our subscribers are interested in. we've not had a peep out of any of them about second seasons or returning shows or anything like that. And I mean, during the Investors Day and all that, we heard nothing about like what I would call generic, the documentary style, the reality TV show. They only focus on drama, because I think they realized that people want to watch drama. This filler stuff doesn't sell the same way. I mean, I can tell from my own statistics that the interest in these kind of shows, which the majority of 2020 has been, wasn't there. It's and these kind of shows are filler, and there's nothing wrong with putting them in and there's having that variety, but there was too much of, and everything that people wanted was more. Well, they wanted more drama. 2021 is looking really good for that. We've got lots more coming in, but 2020, when they were coming up with the idea of Disney Plus and planning for that first year, when you took all of that away, we were just left with so much filler.
Yeah, and I think they also kind of miscalculated on the audiences for these. I think they really expected that some kids would really be interested in seeing, oh, these are kids and they're making one of those outdoor libraries, a sharing library, or we're going to make little what did they make that first time? The grilled cheese sandwich kind of mashup thing that they did in one of the chef episodes. But kids aren't super interested in that. And adults don't really want to watch kids doing it unless the kids really screw it up. That the entertainment is watching them screw it up. If they had done this with adults, like you suggested, it might have been a different story. And I still think that, like, for Be Our Chef, if they had done it as a design an item that could be sold in the park that you as a consumer could go and get
like MasterChef, something like that, and kind of high end.
You go to the Jolly Holiday restaurant at Disneyland, and they have your special I don't know, croquette or something like that you can have it. So you're not looking for the super fine dining. You're not looking for make sure the parsley is turned at just the right angle and with the drizzle on top or whatever. No, you're looking for something that would be a comfort food at the park.
It's sort of like cake. There is a whole thing of that whole show could have been twisted to be entertaining for the whole family and for adults. But again, they just went too much like it was a show on the Disney Channel, and I think it didn't. It's like it was maybe a little too grown up for kids to watch, because kids would be like, I'm not watching a cookery show. I don't know. I mean, it's so interesting to see what the viewing figures for all of these shows would like and compare. I mean, Disney would never release it, but where we can actually go, no, that was a real flop. That was just we know, and that's ultimately the thing of, you can see what people generate, what generates interest, and it'd be interesting to see how all these came in. Because again, it's like those shows, they were very well made. But they just, the concept, they were missing something. And there's a lot of great stuff that arrived on Disney Plus, but there was a lot of stuff that was just like, okay, we lost. And I feel like, had we had Love Victor and High Fidelity dropping throughout that period, that sort of, during the spring and the summer, it would have really helped had that on there, and I think, we're looking back on it now, I'm sure now, if it was roles were reversed and if they were releasing those shows now, we wouldn't even, they would have probably just dropped and you wouldn't even know about it, because the problems that we had back in January and February feel like they're a long way away now.
Not that far away, honestly.
Yeah. But 2020 has been a long year.
2020 has been a long decade. It was the combination of COVID, plus there was already going to be a content drought after Mandalorian. It wouldn't have gone as long as it was, but we were already like, we don't know when WandaVision's coming. We don't know when Falcon and the Winter Soldier's coming. We don't know what the next big thing after Mandalorian is. And then, of course, COVID just made it worse.
So let's shift gears. Let's move away from anything else from the worst list that caught your eyes.
I could probably drop in like Magic Camp or something like that, but again, we're talking like it was utterly mediocre. So putting it on like the worst list is
Yes, I enjoyed it. It was fine. It was fine for what it was.
And that's fine. I just found
Yeah.
it incredibly
Yeah.
boring. But even so, if someone wanted to watch it, I'd be like, yeah, sure, I'll watch it with you. No problem.
Yeah, it was. I mean, there was a reason why it got canned and put on the shelf for 2 years and had not even a week's promotion for it. It was just like, I just hold on, they've just dropped it into the press release. It's coming on this date. We didn't get a trailer till like 2 days before. It's like, and even I'm like, and I watched it and go, well, they could have given it something. It wasn't that bad.
They didn't even give it key art. It didn't have a theatrical poster. Not even a digital one. Like, okay, yeah, I don't expect to see it in the bin at Target or whatever. But
they did literally. It was like 3 days before it came out.
Right.
And it was like, and I remember watching, going, it wasn't that bad. I mean,
it was mediocre. It was utterly average. And it disappeared the week after it came out. I mean, there was that. Yeah.
Okay, so let's shift now to the positives. So what was some of your highlights of 2020?
Can we start with the most obvious one, the one that just finished?
One Day at Disney.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, One Day at Disney. And Jeff Goldblum. I know that started in 2019, but we have to include Mandalorian season 2. That was the highlight of the year. I don't think anyone would be surprised. So we're not going to hold that to the end of the list. Like, are we going to forget about Mando? Of course not.
No. Mando was fun. I mean, and it was kind of one of those things of, it felt a very different place with the second season to that first season, because the first season was everyone just hyped up on the Baby Yoda memes and kind of, oh, this thing is great and it's fantastic, but we're all like leading up to like Rise of Skywalker, and there was this whole kind of buzz around the Mandalorian and excitement around Disney Plus. But the problem is, as well, of it wasn't out in a lot of places yet. It was only out, like over here in the UK, it wasn't even out. I mean, I was watching it through Disney Plus through like VPNs and stuff. It was like, now we didn't need to. And that, for me over here, the second season was so much different because my friends and family were watching it at the same time. My dad and mum were like talking about, and that made a big difference. But also the second season was just hitting. It was just hitting we didn't have a drop in. I mean, every episode was doing something, was moving the story forward. I mean, everyone was like, oh, it's just a few people like, well, it's a filler episode of Monster of the Week. It was like, yeah, but even that was, very expensive. The budget was, we kept waiting for that cheap episode and it never arrived.
Yeah, no, I've said this multiple times. When we got that first episode with the Crate Dragon fight, I was like, they just spent their entire budget. The rest of the season is never going to live up to that. And they did. Every single episode had something in it where you're like, wow, they spent like the entire first season budget on just that. And there were 8 episodes and they just escalated and escalated. And it was everything that I wanted from the sequel season. And then also to have them actually draw a proper ending on it. We already knew season 3 was coming. So they very easily could have just been, okay, we're going to draw this out a little bit longer. We're going to play the Lost game and we're going to milk Baby Yoda for every single penny that we possibly can. I mean, they still could, but no, if it ended here, if it ended at season 2 and we never got a season 3, be like, no, it was a satisfying ending.
Yeah, very, very good. I mean, there's just no way you can. It's that kind of thing of, this is what people wanted from Disney Plus, and the numbers have shown it, and how popular the show is, and it's just left everybody on a high. And the buzz every week with the spoiler, and that was, you just can't put away from the fact that was a highlight. So I'm going to also talk now Star Wars: The Clone Wars, another fantastic series that dropped earlier this year. There was a few odd episodes in the middle that felt a little bit filler, but that finale with Ahsoka and the Bad Batch, so you had the Ahsoka and the Order 50. It just worked. I mean, I remember everyone just being so excited about that finale of Star Wars: The Clone Wars, and it helped so much set up the Mandalorian.
There was that too, but it was also a very different tone than the Mandalorian, which I helped set it apart. And I'm talking specifically about the 4 final episodes, which make up what really made the season great. And those were a much more introspective kind of, I mean, they had their action sequences, obviously, but the music was much more sedate. It was much lower key.
Mm.
There were a lot of moments of just kind of quiet walking from scene to scene. You know something big is about to happen, and it kind of lets it build up to it.
Yeah.
Whereas Mandalorian was very frequently in your face. Here's some explosions. Here's some fighting. Oh, we haven't been fighting for about 10 minutes now, so let's get into another big fight. And Clone Wars was just a great compliment to Revenge of the Sith, and it worked so well as an ending to the series. And that final scene with Vader walking through the snow, and just like it was
But also,
hauntingly beautiful.
But also, it's like in some way, it was gaining every time the Mandalorian was dropping an episode. It was people were going back and watching episodes of the Clone Wars to kind of get hints, because the Clone Wars has pretty much been in the trending list since the show came out. I mean, that's where you look at something like this and go, that show. You know, when you look at that trending list, you can see what people are watching, and that show is still there now, 6-8 months after that last season dropped. And people are going back because of the Mandalorian, but it's been a constant thing, and it goes up and down the charts. And the Mandalorian was the same, when they go up and down, and some of the movies would do the same. When that's what you would be looking at, like, you know, it's not necessarily how many people are watching like a movie like Safety today, it's how many people are watching it as it goes on. And the Clone Wars has just been one of those, again, a very good highlight. It was a bit of an odd, I think the middle arc was the one which wasn't so good, but the Bad Batch, I mean, we're going to host spin-off for that for 2021, and I'm actually kind of looking forward to that. The middle story wasn't so keen, but yeah, that the final 4 episodes with Darth Maul and Ahsoka and setting up for Order 66 was just fantastic.
I'm kind of curious how many people went back and watched the Rebels episode with Sabine giving the Darksaber to Bo-Katan,
Well,
and how many people were like,
yeah.
How many people were like, but Sabine just gave the Darksaber to Bo-Katan, just handed it right over, or after the final Mandalorian episode, and it's like, yeah, but we also spent an entire season wondering, wait, Mandalorians aren't supposed to take their helmets off, but we saw Bo-Katan and all these people, and it's coming. But I still would love to see that metric.
Maybe because Bo-Katan knew that she could beat Sabine, and therefore it didn't matter where she knew she could beat
the point being, we can expect an explanation will come the way we got an explanation for the helmet thing. But I would still love to see that metric of how many people of the viewership spike on that particular episode.
So what else jumped out to you from 2020's list?
So for me, the obvious one, the one that I was super hyped for, The Right Stuff.
Amazing series, a really great show. I really enjoyed that show. That was it's funny because I said to one of the people I was working with the other day, I said, because they just got Disney Plus because they got the 6-month deal with O2 as a freebie kind of thing. So I watched I said, well, I know you don't like Star Wars, but man, it's The Right Stuff. And I said to her, well, what's it about? I said, it's about going to space in 1960s. And she went, yeah, I'm not going to watch that. I'm like, it's great. And like mum and dad were like, yeah, it's really, and I'm like, you know, it's like, it's a show which in some ways was, I feel like being on Disney Plus helped Disney Plus go forward, but at the same time, maybe the numbers weren't there watching it because people weren't looking for that kind of content on Disney Plus because they've not set that up in the But I really enjoyed that series. It was a proper. If that had been on any network, Netflix, Amazon, that would have been a show I would have watched, and that's where I kind of put that thing of, would I have watched that if it wasn't on Disney Plus? And that would have been a definite yes. I would have seeked that out no matter where that was.
Yeah, it was an excellent show. I certainly had some complaints about it. I wish they'd done some things differently, but at the end of the day, I really did enjoy every single episode. And for anybody who picked up HBO Max this past weekend to check out Wonder Woman, the movie, The Right Stuff, is on there, and it is a great compliment to the television show. Very little overlap, so highly recommend it on that. It is like 3.5 hours long, though, so set the time aside.
Yeah, it's well, that was definitely one of the highlights of 2020. Right. Was
so we've got Right Stuff, Mandalorian, Clone Wars. What would be next on there for you?
Just looking here at the list. I really enjoyed Mulan. Mulan had a bit of an odd movie, because obviously it got released on Premier Access and then it got put onto Disney Plus, and they did release it on DVD and other platforms, but it debuted on Disney Plus. Now I know a lot of people don't like it. I know a lot of people have got problems with it, but for me personally, I watched it and I got to the end of it, and me and my wife just was like, that was great. I really enjoyed watching it. It had, I wasn't connected to Mulan. I think I've only seen the original Mulan once. I don't have that connection with that movie at all. So in some ways, it didn't matter. I wasn't connecting the songs. I didn't, Mushu and all the rest of it. I didn't, because I was looking at this movie on its own. And I love, martial art movies like, it's Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, House of Flying Daggers, Hero. So I like the look of Mulan. I like the way it was a big epic fight scene. And I just really enjoyed it. And it was definitely one of my favorite movies of the year. And yeah, to me, it's actually one of the best live action remakes, because it's not a scene for scene shot. I've watched it twice, and I will watch it again probably over Christmas, because I just thought I really enjoyed it. And it's like, and it got so much hate, and I'm going, what are they seeing something different than I think the big thing is I'm not going in looking at it as it being the animated version. I looked at it as its own. If they'd called this movie something else and just said, I don't know, any name, and they didn't even call it Mulan, this would have been something that, had I seen the trailer for, I would have rented probably anyway. It just had something about it that I was really intrigued about, and I really enjoyed it, and I definitely put it as one of my favorite movies of the year.
Yeah, so I watched it after it came on to regular access. I didn't pay the $30, and I'm very thankful that I didn't. I don't fall into the hater group, the one you're talking about, and I very much can split it from the animated movie. The lack of Mushu, the lack of Cricket. I know they turned him into a human, which was a little bit weird, but the lack of the songs or whatever, it really does make it feel like it's not the same movie. So I can judge it on its own merits.
Yeah,
and I guess for me, it really was, I just didn't like Mulan, the character. She was a completely uninteresting, zero personality character. I thought the witch, the bad guy witch character, was far more interesting than Mulan was in just about every sense. Like, she had an interesting arc. She was there with the Mongols or whatever their group was. And you can tell that she's like the most powerful one there, but nobody gives her any respect because she's a woman. Whereas
that's what she wants.
Yeah, and she just wanted some respect, and that alone was more interesting than anything with Mulan, where it's just like, I'm super powerful, but I have to pretend to be a man. Well, why? Because
it was, for me, it was a definite highlight, and I really enjoyed it, and I have got no regrets about paying my £20 to watch it. It's one of those movies of going, this whole thing with Premier Access, we're going to see a lot of it, I think, in 2021. And you've got to play each one as how you like it. For example, I think Wonder Woman is going to be coming out as a premium rental over here in a couple of weeks' time, and I think I'll do it because it'll be like, I actually want to watch something new and exciting. So, but like Witches was the same thing. It's like, I didn't pay. I just like, no, I'll wait for that one. And everyone's going to have the different ones, and I do not, under any circumstances, if someone says to me, like you were like going, it's not worth the $30, I'm going to wait. For me, it was like, fine, good. Just you've got the date, when it's coming. You've made it. You've been informed by Disney of what time it's coming, and you've made the choice, and you want to wait. Fine. People that were buying it, and people were like being mocked for buying it. It's like, and then go, who? Like, no, that's their. It was their. It was a decision that anyone can make. It's like going to the cinema. You could have gone to cinema to see it, or you could not. That was your choice if you want to go see it. And I think premium rentals and stuff are the same way. If you do not want to do it, don't do it. If it's too, and I think £30, £20, $30, depending on where you are. It depends on the movie. I'm not wouldn't pay £20 to watch every single movie that came out. If they released The Croods, I wouldn't buy it. I would have been, I don't want to watch it. I'll wait. But if they released, Black Widow, I think there would be a massive. It's like when, and everyone go, oh well, I would do it for Black Widow. It's like, well, no. You you're either against the system or you just don't like the movie. That's a different thing. But yeah, I do think Mulan got a lot of, I mean, there's so much, the fact that essentially in the US, they didn't even promote Mulan coming to Disney Plus. That was how bad the reaction to that movie had become, because and they didn't even promote. Over here, we had it was on television, it was on buses, it was on flyers. You know, they were heavily on Disney.co.uk. US didn't even mention it. That was how they got to that point where it was just, as far as they were concerned, something they couldn't even promote.
Yeah, there was some controversy around it.
There was a lot of controversy about that movie.
It's not exclusive to the premium access either, but we're not going to go into that.
We're not going to go into that one. So what else kind of stood out for me for 2020?
I'm going to go ahead and throw on something a little different here. We're going to talk prop culture, which was one of my favorites of the year. But as I mentioned earlier in this episode, I love behind the scenes stuff. And in particular, I love the actual tangible things. Like I used to really enjoy going on, say, the Great Movie Ride at Hollywood Studios and the Backlot Tour. I know a lot of people are like those were the most boring rides in the park, but it's like, I loved seeing that stuff. And when I went out to Universal in California last year, I was like, I got to do the Backlot Tour there and see all the cool stuff they have hidden back there.
The one at Universal was just like, because that was real. You know, I still like, you know,
that was an actual backlot.
We were watching The Grinch the other day, and I'm going, I remember seeing all that. But you know that I'm in the same boat with that kind of thing.
The only time I've ever done one of those backlot rides and been disappointed was the one at Paris Disneyland. The one there is
Rain of Fire. Rain of Fire. It's like, but we didn't film any of this here. None of this was.
I think it was Rain of Fire, and then some random like When the Earth Got Destroyed movie from like 2000, another dinosaur movie. It was like, this was really a waste of time. But the ones at Universal, the ones at Hollywood Studios, which isn't there anymore, unfortunately, I love them. I will always do those rides. And prop culture is literally just a documentary where it's like, here is this really cool thing. We've got the ship from Pirates of the Caribbean right here. I'm just like, yes. I ended up watching the entire series. It was great.
Yeah, for me, it was one of those shows where the love and attention for it, the detail that they went into, the people they got involved in it, but also, you know, Dan as the presenter, he had so much love, and it came through. You know, he wasn't just a presenter that was just, you know, he was his own personal collector. He loved this stuff and he understood it, and that came through. You know, they could have put a different presenter. If they just picked a random generic presenter and just shoved them in there, it would have been a very different series. But that made it. You know, prop culture was made, I think, with the love of him, and it was just very well made. I'm really hoping we get some more of this, because it feels like, I mean, with the Disney Archive, it just feels like such an easy series.
Yeah. Well, this is what I was talking about last week with, say, On Point, which isn't a series I normally wouldn't care about, but you can see the passion that these people have for their sport. And it's the same with him with the props. And when you have a show with someone genuinely interested in what they're talking about, and you can tell, it makes the show that much better.
Yeah, they're definitely a highlight. Shifting over from there, I'm going to give a shout out to Safety in Clouds. I'm going to kind of throw them in together of two movies I never expected I was going to like. And I thought they were very emotional trips, very really enjoyable, proper movies, you know, both of which just had something about them that I really enjoyed those two movies. They definitely kind of ended the year of kind of going, you know, when you look at the library of movies and go, I remember I'm looking at these two going, yeah, those two stood out. Those were ones I hadn't expected, and they exceeded my expectations. They went higher, and that's what you like. You know, when you go into watch something like, you know, I was like, oh, I've got to, you know, because sometimes it's like, you know, like a movie like Safety, I was not interested in. I'm like, oh, I'm going to have to watch this movie. Okay, let's watch it. And we kind of got to the end of it and went, like, oh, that was really good.
and they are, both of them are a good answer to that complaint that we had at the beginning of the year, where they got rid of Love Simon and
Love Victor.
Love Victor. Sorry, there was a show with Simon.
Love
in the
Simon
name, right?
was the movie.
That's okay, right. I knew I was mixing it up somewhere, but these got kicked off of Disney Plus, or were never going to be part of it in the first place. And these two that we ended up getting, Clouds and Safety and Black Beauty to a certain extent, were the much more mature stories that we've been looking for. Now that didn't mean they were violent. There's no nudity. There's nothing like that into it, but they tell a much more mature story that they don't. What's the word I'm looking for? They don't tone it down a lot.
The thing is, it's aimed, I would say, at I wouldn't say necessarily at teenagers. It's that kind of thing of like they didn't go into it's not mature, but they've gone for the fact that we're expecting people to watch it with a little bit of this is not for kids. It's not the kids are gonna for Clouds to be it's about a kid that dies from cancer. This is not. This is not super fluffy and full of magic and all the rest of it. It's just an uplifting tale of real life. And those, it's kind of funny because we think of all these. The trouble is with 2020 is we didn't really get the big blockbusters. So in some way these kind of little movies became blockbusters because they were like when I look back at like all the movies I've seen over the years or over this last year, there was a lot of movies like this, which on the normal circumstances, I've been sat there going, The Jungle Cruise was great. And, this Black Widow and Eternals. And, that's what we would have been talking about. But with them all out of the way, suddenly something like Safety and Clouds kind of has a little bit more like, well, no, out of the 10 movies I've seen this year, these stood out. Whereas on, like I said, the big blockbusters probably would have overtaken them.
Yeah. And they really did kind of get us to the end. They brought us home and we're like, okay, we're ending on a high note between these and the Mandalorian and a couple other things.
The last 3 months on Disney Plus have had some fantastic programming.
Yeah. Why don't we bring one up? We already talked about this one earlier. Soul was a great way to end the year.
I mean, again, Soul was just well, again, this is the difference, and this has been that thing of Disney Plus this year of with having things like Artemis Fowl, the one and only Ivan, Mulan, and Soul. You've had some movies drop onto Disney Plus which would never have been on Disney Plus. They took a punt on them and going, right, we need to do something with these movies. Soul is a movie that would have gone, it was supposed to have gone to cinemas in June. They got delayed, and then they pushed it to Disney. And it's like, it's such a great movie. And it's kind of, and I'm really hoping the viewership and the subscriber levels show Disney and going, this is maybe, because I think, with ones like Luca and things coming up of like, where is this all going to land? How's this all going to work out with Raya coming up in March with being Disney Plus Premier Access and cinema? Are they going to try that thing again? Soul is a definite highlight of, again, if you were looking at like the best animated movie of 2020, there is little doubt that is up there. And it's just a very, I can't say how that one's not probably going to win an Oscar, because it's up against the Croods and the
Trolls.
The Trolls. So there's not really that's about, there's just hardly been, there's hardly been anything out, but Soul is a definite high quality movie and I really enjoyed that one.
I think its biggest contender will actually be Onwards, which is the other Pixar movie of the year. And I'm saying that as a relative thing.
Well, because it's kind of, Onwards a bit of an odd one, because over here it didn't arrive till like July because they kept it in the cinemas even though they were shut, and I think it was due to with the Sky contract, which I think ends like next week. So I think we're, all the Sky channels and stuff will be shutting down, the Disney channel. So I think that was why because we didn't get Frozen 2 straight away either. I think there has been some contract issues. So Onward was a bit of an odd one because essentially it was in cinemas for a week and then it came to Disney Plus. It'd be kind of in most people's eyes, it probably is a Disney Plus original through like, people will look at it as like, oh yeah, that was, no one went to see it at the cinema because it was there. It wasn't there. But I still, Onward is like, I still look at it and go, yeah, Soul was much better at it. I enjoyed Onward, but I haven't gone back to it. It didn't. It was a real kind of movie that I think I got lost at the shuffle.
It's one of the true casualties of this year, in terms of movies anyway. We're just like, it's the one that's always going to have a little asterisk next to it in the Pixar.
It's like the box office is like, this much, and this one. It's like, why is it the worst? Well, it's not his fault. It wasn't. It was like, it's there. Anyone else kind of stood out to you from 2020?
Let's see, real fast. I'd give a shout out to Rogue Trip, the National Geographic's documentary. That was a pretty good one.
I enjoyed. The thing is, I love travel documentaries. I mean, I'm someone that has spent much of their life roaming the earth, and I enjoyed where they were doing, and I just wasn't so keen on the guys doing it. It was a bit too much focus on their relationship, and it's like, and I don't know, it was one of those things that didn't quite hit where I wanted it to. And I love these kind of documentaries, but this was down to presenters and not necessarily how they filmed it. Again, not really knowing who they were. I mean, normally that wouldn't be a thing, but they kind of pushed on that a lot, the expectations that you knew. And again, this is where Disney sometimes loses the idea of internationally these people aren't known the same way, and a news presenter in the US is not going to be known over here. And it doesn't have a massive impact, but you still got Australia, and it's like me, if I just took a random TV presenter off the BBC News and put him in front of a US audience, and this is his story, you'd be like, well, I've never heard of him. That's the way you got to look at it.
To be fair, I've never heard of these guys either.
Yeah, but I just something about them didn't quite connect with me the same way as I was hoping.
I will admit that I wasn't particularly interested in their story at all, but the places they visited,
that was amazing.
The things they saw were fantastic. So I was willing to overlook the awkwardness. I was like, we're gonna have a father-son moment. I'm like, okay, great. Yeah. I'm just going to stare at the redwoods.
Yeah, it's the thing. That was why that series was kind of like in the middle ground for me, because it's like, I enjoyed bits of it and I didn't enjoy the other bits. So that was one. I kind of was the same a bit about the magic of Disney's Animal Kingdom. It was a bit of it was good, but at the same time, a little bit too fluffy. We needed a little bit more zing to it. It was missing. It needed a bit of, I would say, a bit of tension, a bit of drama. It was a bit too safe, and I think they were playing way too safe with it being a Disney park.
So they did a lot of Disney documentaries, which definitely played it safe. And I think what they need to do moving forward is kind of aim the audience upwards a little bit, because
Josh Gad being wrong for
it. The magic of the Magic Kingdom, of the magic animals within the Magic Kingdom, or whatever the hell it was called. Heck, it was called. I
know, because Magic and Animal Kingdom all in the same word. You want to say Magic Kingdom, you just get one of because the Magic and Magic Kingdom. No, it's not.
In any event, it definitely skewed very young, and I think kids are going to enjoy it because it's got the animals, and you get to learn about the animals, you get to see them up close and stuff like that. They had that. They had the chimps. Meet the Chimps with
that was
Jane. What's her last name?
The one Lynch.
Right. Yes, Jane Lynch from
Wreck-It Ralph.
From Glee and also from Wreck-It Ralph. And it skewed young, and with that target demographic, I think it was perfectly fine. I think it hit what it was going for. But
I would just like them to go maybe Secrets of the Zoo level, just to take it up just a notch.
That's what I was getting at. They need to put it up a little bit. Let National Geographics continue to have their thing. They can have their rogue trips. Yeah. They can have the stuff that's aimed very definitely adults. But Disney needs to understand that these documentaries that are aimed at kids also need to have content that the parents aren't going to be just completely bored with. Now, I enjoyed them. I put them middle ground. But I also agree. I would like to have a little bit more little older, a little bit more factual too, because these are definitely, hey, look at the giraffe. Here we're going to change the giraffe shoe. Oh, the giraffe doesn't want to put his feet on there because he's a little skittish. Let's get some giraffe facts in there as well.
The thing is, like, Secret of the Zoo is a very, I mean, they've exported it to so many different zoos over the years, and that's kind of where you want this to go. It just needs, it's got potential. I mean, that could be a really potential good series, I think, for them to carry on with, but they're very much. Someone was sat somewhere for, we need to protect the park. We protect the park at all costs, and therefore it doesn't. There's a little bit of protection going over, like not letting anything seem bad. No animal can suffer. I was like, well, there's, if it gets a disease and it dies or something, you can show it. That's what happens in a zoo, And yeah, I think they were a little bit skittish of like not going into anything slightly bad.
I know they have to be careful with that, though. Of course, if an animal gets sick in a zoo, you can just say, well, it happens. Animals get sick just like people do. But being that the animal is under their care, they also have to be able to say, like, it didn't get sick because we forgot to change the water for a week or something like that. They have to make sure that 100% they did everything they could to make sure that the animals were in a healthy environment. And this was just, hey, it caught a cold. These things happen.
The thing is I think the problem is, I think like the Imagineering story from last year set that tone where they were able to kind of dive into some of the failures and not super gloss it. And I think that was maybe where we were hoping for something a bit more like that. It didn't quite hit there. Just looking here at a few other things here that kind of stood out. I really enjoyed the fact that we had things like the celebration of Coco, Black is King, and Folklore, and Hamilton. A bit of music, a bit of something in there, a bit different. I did enjoy the Folklore Taylor Swift one. Found Black is King it's absolutely visually stunning, and I like some of the songs on it. Coco I really loved, but I wish they'd just shown us the whole concert rather than trying to dash it into bits. Especially having watched Coco again yesterday on Christmas Day, it would have been quite nice to have just let them show the whole presentation rather than. That was my one issue with the Coco one.
Yeah, it felt a little disjointed because they would sing a song and then we would cut to some people talking, and then they would sing a song and cut to some people talking. It really would have been better if they had just done the concert. But it also came out right at the beginning of all this, and I think they were still kind of holding out hope that, we'll get people back into the parks. We'll get people back into watching the shows the way we want them to watch it, i.e. you give us a lot of money. And it wasn't until later when they're like, the things are not normal. Here's Hamilton, and here's Taylor Swift, and
I mean, Taylor Swift is a kind of the thing of this, like, I mean, the whole project she did was about it being because I mean, she ended up releasing another second album because she found herself in that zone of being stuck at home and being creative. Something like Folklore was just essentially them. Let's send them up to a log cabin. We put a load of cameras in and film them. And something so simple, but it worked. It was like, I'll be honest, we were watching TV yesterday, and I'm there going, okay, so we had a clip show, and then there was a multiple game shows with guests being socially distanced, and it was like, I said, there's not really a lot of drama. I said, because you can see that they've had to just fill in where it's, sort of like Call the Midwife. Suddenly, half the scenes they've got masks on. Like, well, they've never wore them in any of the other episodes. But you can see like the effect COVID had on the Christmas schedule yesterday was because, all these game shows of everyone being spaced out was because they just had to fill. They couldn't put their normal stuff on because they needed just to fill it in. And I'm sure we're going to see more of it. But I think 2021 with the Marvel shows throughout the year are really going to change our expectations, because we're not going to have that drought. I mean, between like now, it's hard to believe, like, we went from the Mandalorian ending at Christmas last year to October before we got a brand new drama series. We've got WandaVision dropping in 3 weeks, 2 weeks, and then we've got Falcon and Loki, and we've got maybe someone else dropping before the Mandalorian or Boba Fett returns. We've got so much more coming in, and I think that's going to be a big thing. And that's where the 2020 lineup, we kind of have like the first 3 to 4 months where it was all a bit too safe. And then COVID hit, and then they're like, we just need as much stuff on here as possible. And we're going to just start changing how we're doing it. And then the end of, the last 4 months of 2020 have just been good stuff dropping weekly. And, it's almost like, it does feel like we've had 3 different zones of Disney Plus this year.
Yeah, and it's also kind of why our 2 lists, both our worst and our best lists, are so similar. There's not much to pick from this year. I expect next year our list will actually look fairly different, where some of the things will appeal to me more than they appeal to you, and vice versa. And something that may flop terribly with me, you end up loving. And so this year it's like, what's on your list? Oh yeah, that's on my list too. Oh yeah, that's also on my list.
Yeah.
And maybe there's like 2 or 3 small differences in there. I'm expecting next year will be different in that regard.
Well, on next week's podcast, we're going to be looking ahead to 2021, and we're going to be kind of rolling through everything that's going to be coming out. I'm working on some lists to be going up now between the Christmas and New Year period. So we're going to be running through on next week's show what we're looking forward to, what's coming, and that's going to be the focus of next week's show. So there we go. That is the best and worst of 2020. Let us know in the comments below what you loved, but also let us know what you don't like, because we know you got to be, cover both sides of the art thing. Again, a huge thank you to all of our patrons and YouTube members for all of their support. Again, a huge thank you to Sarah for all of her support at the executive producer level. And just want to say a big thank you as well for James for joining me all year. We'll be back next week with another episode, and we shall see you guys soon. Happy New Year, everyone. Stay safe.
Happy New Year.